So there are really two pieces to leveraging the intrinsic motivation of the executive. There was a gentleman that I coached years ago who was the head of research for an international manufacturing company. And he got referred in because he was kind of edgy and difficult. I wouldn't say, he never cursed at people. I said to him, as I shared with you, that the first part of this is about my determining whether you have intrinsic motivation. And if you don't, I'm leaving. I didn't say it with that tone of voice, but that's basically the communication. I don't know about you, but my experience is if you don't do something like that, they come in trying to prove that you're an inadequate coach and you don't know what you're doing. So the first part, so again, that first part is to explain that, by the way, I've discussed this with your boss, and if after 6 to 8 hours in my professional and personal judgment, you don't have enough intrinsic motivation, I'm going to leave. And I've told your boss that you should not be disciplined or it should not affect your career if I leave, that your boss should only evaluate you on whether you change these behaviors. So that's pretty powerful. And typically, I don't want to hear about the background. I don't want to hear what their goals are. I want to hear them tell me why they are intrinsically motivated to change. Now, what typically happens is they need 2 or 3 hours to vent on how ridiculously politically correct and what a stupid situation this is. And I will tell you, I think part of the reason that I am able to work with them around that, there's several reasons. The first is I was raised in a city housing project in New York that was built for returning war veterans. So it's not Fort Apache, the Bronx. It was all working people. And I came away with 3 values. One was integrity. Second one was accountability. And the third one is I don't know exactly what to call it, but I call it reality, which is don't accept what appears on the surface, get down there and find out what's really going on. And I usually tell them that. I also tell them that I once got fired for being abrasive. So there's a connection piece. But more importantly, I tell them, and by the way, this is 100% true, and if we have some conversation about this, that will be fine, that we live in a society that some schools, for instance, will not let kids play tag because the person who is it will have their self-esteem damaged. And that people who are the target of this kind of behavior are considered victims as opposed to targets. And there isn't an expectation that you learn how to deal with that. So I am not in any way saying that demeaning, bullying behavior should be tolerated, but I am saying that there is a lack of accountability on the part of the targets also within our society. And so I communicate that. I do think that it's not the most terrible thing in the world, and this is from a former executive who was fired for his tone. So I still think it's not the most terrible thing in the world for somebody to get a sarcastic remark from somebody else who's their boss and not break down and fall apart. On the other hand, at the same time, I also recognize that compassion is important. So if I sound like I have a couple of conversations going on in my head, I do. The other piece that I do is and I've been doing this lately, I've only been doing this for the last 1.5 years, but I've been reviewing the ethos of the Navy SEALs with them. And I have been applauding them and honoring them for their warrior spirit. However, their incomplete warrior spirit. I find that it's far more effective to challenge them to become better warriors than to tell them that they're behaving badly and that they should change because they're not being appropriate to society. When they know for sure that the people around them are also not behaving as they should behave in teams and in organizations, et cetera, et cetera. So there is a sense of unfairness. So this gentleman that I was starting to tell you about came in, and I had that conversation with him, and we started digging around for intrinsic motivation. We were talking, and he was looking for his intrinsic motivation, and I said, let me ask you a question. And he said, what's that? And I said, do you believe in a higher power? And he said, yes, I do. And I said, well, tell me about that. Do you really believe in a higher power? Do you believe there's a higher power operating in your life? And he said yes, and we talked about that a little bit, and somewhere along the line I became convinced that actually this is a person who is a true Christian. And so I said to him, this is what changed the case. This was what cracked it. I said to him, is it possible that God has put you in the middle of all of these obnoxious, lazy, irresponsible people so that you could learn tolerance, love, compassion, and forgiveness? And there was dead silence, dead silence. And immediately, it was similar to my own experience. Immediately, overnight, there was a major change. Now, he needed ongoing coaching because, you know, you get triggered and it doesn't go away. As those of you who know neuropsychology, what's being taught, you have these neural pathways in your brain that continue to operate for years, and it's essentially you're building a new path that isn't quite as strong as the other one.